Good afternoon to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, to our viewers on the Parliament channel, and to those of you joining us via the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. We are here for the next few hours, bringing you coverage of today's sitting of the House of Representatives and the Senate. It is, in fact, a ceremonial opening of the fourth session of the 12th Republican Parliament. My name is Jason Alcock, and with me in studio are journalist Wesley Gibbings and former Marshal of the Parliament, Mr. Grantley Dick. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Jason.
Good afternoon, Jason.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
It is a pleasure to have you both. I know, Wesley, this is your first time at this location. You have been with us before at Tower D, and Grantley, you were with us. You've been with us previously. This afternoon, we will be chronicling the events of today leading up to the opening of Parliament. What, in fact, makes this occasion ceremonial is, in fact, the address by the President to the members of both houses here assembled. And over the next few minutes, we will go to both the House of Representatives and the Senate, where we'll see the various members beginning to enter in both chambers, as well as we'll go to Abercrombie Street, where Her Excellency the President will inspect a guard of honor. Just to let you know the order in which some of these things will be transpiring, at precisely 1:30 p.m., both houses will begin with the reading of the proclamation issued by Her Excellency declaring the fourth session of the 12th Parliament open. This will be followed by the suspension of both houses. In the case of the Senate, we understand that there are some senatorial appointments to be made. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Following which, both houses will be suspended. All of the members will assemble in the House of Representatives chamber, and we will await Her Excellency, who will inspect the Guard of Honor, and then proceed to the chamber to address the members of both houses. So, gentlemen, that's what we are about. Wesley?
Well, it's very, very interesting times and a very interesting and important occasion indeed. The timing is such that, it's more than trite to say that what we are facing here is a very packed parliamentary agenda. So it would be interesting to hear the President on her views on how the Parliament should proceed in terms of the conduct of its business. It would be interesting to see in the coming days, of course, to see how the parliamentary agenda unfolds in response to a litany of emerging issues. And so I think it's a very significant occasion, very important. It's a first for President Kangaloo, and I think it's worthwhile to listen very carefully to the signals she sends.
Indeed. Grantley, anything to add?
Well, from my own observation, Her Excellency has settled in quite nicely to the amount of ceremonial that has attended her so far, from her inauguration in March, was it?
Yes.
And then to Independence Day parade and so on. From my own observation, she has grown accustomed to the type of ceremonial.
Yes, indeed, she has. Her Excellency, of course, no stranger to the Parliament itself, having served as President of the Senate between 2015 and earlier this year. So it is a sort of coming home for her in that respect. And so we await fervently whatever words she chooses to address the members of both houses.
I think that such credentials would be add interest to the tenor, the tone that she sets when she delivers her remarks this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. We have gone over to the cameras in the chamber. We see some former presiding officers. That is it Mr. Barendra Sinanan?
Barendra Sinanan, yes.
And next to him, former President of the Senate, Hamel Smith, if memory serves.
Timothy Hamel Smith.
Timothy Hamel Smith, yeah. So persons are in fact entering the chamber. We will go across to the chamber from time to time where we can see members assembling. And just to let you know that the Senate is in fact filling as well. We do have eyes on the Senate. We have a number of our senators already in place and awaiting the start of today's proceedings. It's always important to remind people of the fact that there are in fact two chambers now. That has been the case since the Parliament returned to the Red House in January of 2020. Prior to this, both chambers utilized the same room for its usual business, and on an occasion such as this, there would be a meeting room that would be temporarily transformed into a Senate chamber just for that occasion. But now we have two dedicated chambers which will meet simultaneously.
And I think that one of the things the members of parliament and senators would need to prepare themselves for is this very busy agenda that we spoke about, that's it's meant to address such a wide variety of issues that the quality of the debate must be such that they address the issues of the day, because I think that the public is going to be paying very close attention to what happens this time around.
Indeed, and there have been some issues that have been quite topical. Some of the last sittings of the House would have been to make amendments to the public procurement and disposal of public property legislation. As that piece of legislation begins to be worked, no doubt there may be need for further amendments. I read in the news today about potentially the bail bill being brought back in some format, and of course, in order to pass it, you need a requisite special majority. So there'll have to be some sort of negotiation if that is in fact the case. And of course, the elephant in the room, we are in September. The end of the financial year is September 30th. So very soon there will be a budget debate where we will understand what the fiscal measures to be implemented in the following financial year will be. And I know that will take up much of the Parliament's time throughout October.
Absolutely, and I think that the budget you wouldn't be able to see it in isolation, because what the budget is going to address is such a wide variety of issues that you'll find local government finding its way there, because in order to implement local government reform, as was discussed during the recent election campaign, if you look up at procurement, the whole issue of the Revenue Authority, and some of these overhanging things.
Indeed, Siparia and Diego Martin have changed their composition. They now have mayors, and the legislation will have to be proclaimed at some point in time to make members of local government full-time and things of that nature. So there will be a number of measures to be taken in the coming days. That is former Speaker Nisam Mohammed, if I'm not mistaken. So we have some presiding officers on the screen. Over in the Senate, should we may be preempting by going over to the Senate over here now. Those are our incoming independent senators. We'll leave their names. We'll leave their names for now. You'll figure out who they are in time being. No doubt you would have recognized some of them. We have four new independent senators who will be joining us today. Of course, outside of the Red House, we have a view now of Abercrombie Street and members entering the chamber. See Minister Young. And at approximately 12:15, I believe it is, the Guard of Honor will make its way down Frederick, across and up onto Abercrombie Street to await the arrival of Her Excellency. So there's a lot going on the outside. We will be here on the inside, accompanying you until 1:30 p.m. when we go over to the chambers. So I thought that I would have a bit of an education as to what some of these terms that we bandy about mean. Of course, I did indicate what makes this occasion ceremonial is an address to both members of both houses assembled together. This will be the fourth session of the 12th Republican Parliament. And what that means is that since we became a republic in 1976, we are now in the 12th Parliament since that time, from 1976 to 81, 81 to 86, 91 to 95, 95 to 2000, 2001, 2002, which was the 7th Parliament, 1818, which never got off the ground, and 2002 to 2007, coming forward in five-year terms. Each Parliament can be further subdivided in terms of the work that is done into one-year sessions, and we've completed 3 now, and we are on to the 4th of what is usually 5 sessions, making up a 5-year parliamentary term. So at 1:30 p.m. today, the proclamation has been issued and it will be read, opening the 4th session of the 12th Republican Parliament. The Guard of Honor is now making its way across to Abercrombie Street. Granted, I know this is your area of specialty. Can you give us a little bit of information on what comprises the Guard of Honor today?
Well, yes, we usually like to let the public know that Guards of Honor are usually provided for major official and ceremonial occasions. For example, the state visits of important personages to Trinidad and Tobago, the opening of the law term, and of course, ceremonial opening of the Parliament. Units of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force will form this Guard of Honor, 96 personnel comprising soldiers, sailors, and airmen drawn from the regiment, Coast Guard, and the Trinidad and Tobago Air Guard. The Guard commander this afternoon is Major Corey Joseph, and they were formed up on Hart Street in the vicinity of Holy Trinity Cathedral, compete with their respective color parties, and then they march along Park Street north into Abercrombie Street, and very shortly they will halt in front of the Red House in the vicinity of Woodford Square and face west to await the arrival of Her Excellency the President. Her Excellency the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Trinidad and Tobago.
We're just beginning to hear the proceedings from outside. So we're back. We've just witnessed the arrival of the Guard of Honor outside Abercrombie Street, who will now await the arrival of Her Excellency the President. As we were speaking about the legislative agenda a moment ago, I took down some information that's pertinent to the last session. In fact, there were 33 sittings of the House of Representatives. There were 28 sittings of the Senate in the last session, which is on the low side. I remember being here in 2000, and in that year we passed 92 acts, which was, I think, the most.
That was a record.
That was a record. We even had a sixth session on that occasion. The Attorney General at the time wanted to pass a lot of legislation. So we can expect somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to 40 pieces of legislation to make its way through the various houses. There are several pieces of legislation that will be brought back from the last session. Representation of the people and several others. The Tobago legislation that has been on the books for some time. What happens now is that a motion is carried in the House that allows for those pieces of legislation that have not been completed to be brought forward into the new session at the stage where they are, so that there's not a question of repeating from the beginning everything that would have transpired, and so there are at least 5 pieces of legislation to which that would have applied, and they would have done it at the last sitting of the House on Friday. So certainly I remember 2 of them being the Constitutional Amendment Bill pertaining to Tobago, the Tobago Island Bill, I believe. I may have the nomenclature a bit wrong. And so we will have quite a number of things already on the agenda from, day 2, this being day 1. So we do intend to be quite busy.
Yes,
in the time to come.
all that was left suspended, and plus what else that will come, because as I was suggesting before, there's a high level of interrelatedness between the different pieces of legislation as they relate to the development agenda. So it's going to be extremely difficult to deal with Tobago or bail or procurement all as entirely discrete issues, because there is a high level of interrelatedness. And I think, as I said, public interest is very high to see what becomes of all of those issues that occupy public attention right now. Crime, issues related to education, the economy. And I think that it would be incumbent on parliamentarians to display the extent to which all of these things are related to each other, so that one is reliant on the next. And therefore it would require a quality of legislation that's going to transcend mere action on a single discrete issue.
Indeed.
So, I'm seeing the budget already being very key when it comes to some of the issues I mentioned before regarding the Revenue Authority, local government, because don't forget the local government reform is linked to the employment of taxation, including property tax. So it's going to be very, very interesting, and I think that it's going to be highly incumbent on parliamentarians to bring the debate to that level where the population can understand how these pieces of legislation can fit into the development agenda.
Indeed. I have sight of several members of Parliament entering the chamber, a member for St. Augustine, and of course the leader of the opposition, Mrs. Honorable Kamra Prasad Basesa.
So that the Guard of Honor is properly drawn up, compete with their color parties, under the command of Major Corey Joseph, and he is assisted in his duties this afternoon by Lieutenant Briggs of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. And the Guard Warrant Officer is Warrant Officer Class 1, A. Guppy. We await the arrival of Her Excellency the President on what is her first foray in the capacity of Head of State coming back to the Parliament premises that she's very familiar with
Indeed.
as President of the Senate.
Mm-hmm. We just had sight of former Prime Minister Bajwa Pandey and
Former Speaker of the House.
three former presiding officers as well. It's at these occasions where these former office holders, we get to see all of them in one place. As a matter of fact, members of the judiciary will also join us briefly to witness the proceedings and listen to the address by Her Excellency as well. This is one of those occasions where the representatives of the three arms of state, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, all convene in one location.
Former Speaker Mohammed, Nizam Mohammed, he's now grappling with his new role as chairman of the Repatriation Committee. He's chairman of a three-man team appointed by the Prime Minister in March, and they're responsible for repatriating our citizens who are holed up in the Middle East.
Correct, yes, that's right.
Yeah. And before coming here, I was listening to the Parliament channel, and pleasantly surprised that it was during his stewardship as Speaker that the whole question of live broadcast and televising the proceeding.
It was broached for the first time, and that would
in
have
1989.
been 1989.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Correct. It took.
You were very articulate, Jason, in that whole production.
Well, I was a part of the team that would have eventually worked on it. It was, in fact, Professor Ramesh Diosaran, who in 2004 moved a motion to have the proceedings of Parliament televised live. And that motion would have been adopted. The government at the time agreed. They formed a committee, which was headed by the current Prime Minister, and they would have looked into all of the issues related to broadcasting of debates. And it led to us doing the necessary background work, getting the necessary approvals, and having the first live broadcast of Parliament on the 18th of August, 2006. Was that 17 years now? I have a nice anecdote from that. I don't know if people who were around at the time would have remembered. The channel was launched shortly thereafter. It was launched, if memory serves, in late August or September. And the Prime Minister at the time, Patrick Manning, was giving an address in the center of the rotunda of the Red House, the old Red House. And while he was speaking, there was a massive earthquake that shook the building. And people started to, get a little anxious because, you were in the building and you were feeling a shake. And Patrick Manning at the time just looked up and said, "Oh, that's just an aftershock." And he proceeded to speak. So he kept everybody calm. I don't know if people remember
Even though
that.
he wasn't the geologist in the house.
Yeah. Well, he was, eh? I think he did geology.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He did geology
Yes,
as
that's
well. He did geology as well, too.
But that's an interesting story, because I remember I followed that discussion regarding, because, I mean, most of us in the media were very, very favorable when it came to that suggestion. But I remember it being somewhat of a rocky road.
It was.
I think that there were a lot of fears that this thing can, get out of hand and so on. But I don't think anybody anticipated Parliament channel addiction, because I'm a victim, actually.
I've told the story before. I went to an event, and I sat at a table, and there was a lady there, probably in her 60s. And she said, she "Where do you work?" I said, "I work at the Parliament channel." She opened her eyes and she looked at me. She says, "You?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I don't have access to my TV anymore. My husband looks at the Parliament channel all day." So
yes.
we do have some people who were addicted to the Parliament channel.
It is addictive. Once you have an interest in public affairs, I mean, I think the Parliament channel has done a very good job in terms of bringing, and these historical pieces are fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very important, because it brings important background to a lot of what is happening now.
And I
Indeed.
particularly like the sessions with parliamentary personalities.
Yeah, that
And
was
they
one
will
of the first,
interview
yeah.
people like Sir Ellis Clark and Dr. Williams and Mr. Robinson. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Those are very informative.
That was a conscious decision taken by the management to ensure that people who would have served, that they would not just disappear into the annals of history, but there would be some record of the work that they would have done during their time. The first one that we did with memory serves was Sir Larry Constantine.
Oh, I never
Larry
saw that
Constantine,
one.
who was a member of the Legislative Council.
Baron Constantine of Maraval.
Correct.
I would say the Prime Minister, Honorable Keith Rowley, greeting former Prime Minister Basil Pandey in the house.
Yes, yes.
Basil Pandey there with his daughter Michaela.
Mm-hmm. So we are less than 5 minutes away from 1:30 p.m., at which point we will go over to the chamber, and our interventions will be only in those times where there will be a lull. What we expect is that the proceedings will begin with the clerks reading the proclamations. This will be followed by the speaker doing the house prayer, and then the sittings will be suspended. In the Senate, it may take a little bit longer as we have 4 new independent senators to be sworn in, and at which point the Senate will suspend and all of the members will assemble in the House of Representatives chamber along with the members of the judiciary who will come across at that point, and all await the arrival of Her Excellency the President, who will inspect the Guard of Honor, then proceed into the Red House, and then she'll be escorted to the Parliament chamber by a fanfare. So stay with us on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament channel as we cover the proceedings transpiring today.
A proclamation. by Her Excellency Christine Carla Kangaloo, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Whereas it is provided by subsection 1 of Section 67 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, that each session of Parliament shall be held at such place within Trinidad and Tobago, and shall commence at such time as the President may by proclamation appoint. Now, therefore, I, Christine Carla Kangaloo, President as aforesaid, do hereby appoint the Red House, Port of Spain, Trinidad, as the place at which the fourth session of the 12th Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago shall be held at 1:30 p.m. on Monday, the 11th day of September, 2023, as the time at which the said session shall commence, with any member, if necessary, attending a sitting virtually while in Trinidad and Tobago, with the prior approval of the Speaker of the House of Representatives or the President of the Senate, in accordance with guidelines to be established. Given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, at the Office of the President, St. Anne's, this 30th day of August, 2023.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste. Honorable members, the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago desires to address all members of Parliament. This sitting is now suspended.
Trinidad and Tobago with the prior approval of the Speaker of the House or the President in accordance with guidelines to be established. So there are some guidelines that need to be established. It can't be something that is arbitrary, but it will have to be approved by the presiding officer ahead of time so that the full complement, particularly in the House, because the Senate, of course, has the provision whereby a temporary senator can be appointed, but there may be instances where a member may want to be present even though he is unable to be there physically. If, for example, a minister is presenting a bill, he may want to present the bill even though he's not well enough to be physically there. So that's one of the changes that was made during the pandemic that has remained.
I think it's an interesting legacy, and perhaps over time we might see it further elaborated, because it talks here not only about the ability to vote virtually, I would assume,
yes.
but also to participate in parliamentary sittings virtually.
In the last session, I think the Prime Minister did at least one Prime Minister's questions. He did it remotely.
It was done remotely.
So it's things of that nature that you want to ensure.
I think it's interesting and probably a positive one as well.
I think it's a good use of the technology.
But it does restrict it to the member being present in Trinidad and Tobago.
They must be in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's the stipulation for the time being. So on our screens now, the members of the judiciary are making their way across to the Red House to await Her Excellency's arrival.
And this is one of those rare occasions where I suppose you have all arms of government, judiciary, legislature, and
executive
present in the same place at the same time. Are there other occasions where something like this would happen?
Grantley, you might be able to remind me. What other occasions where all three arms of state can be? The opening of the law term, perhaps? Are all members there? Not necessarily.
Independence Day. For the Independence Day parade,
yes,
all arms of the state are invited, and especially the judiciary, they usually come out in their numbers.
Yes.
National Day of Remembrance is another day, Remembrance Day parade. You usually see them come out as well.
Yeah, so it's one of just a few occasions where this happens.
And we were talking off camera a little while ago about the composition of the Guard of Honor.
The Guard of Honor.
Yeah, and the significance. You mentioned the number 96, and I was wondering about that number.
Yes, whenever anything involving Her Excellency the President, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, one would always field a guard the strength of 96 personnel. As I said to you off camera, if we off air, if you're dealing with a functionary who is junior to Her Excellency the President, like a Prime Minister or somebody, you will have a guard of about 48 personnel. But in anything involving the Commander-in-Chief, it's always a 96 member guard.
Interesting.
We do have an acting Chief Justice in place. Yes, Mr. Justice Mendonça, because apparently the Chief Justice is out of the jurisdiction.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We do intend, following this broadcast, to broadcast the entire proceedings transpiring in the Senate. The Senate is still in session, taking a little bit longer because of the need to appoint four new senators. So the senators will join the House when their proceedings have ended. So the Senate is still in session, but we do promise that we will show the proceedings of the Senate start to finish as the judges now enter the Parliament chamber. I know in times past the members of the judiciary would sit sort of in the area normally occupied in the Senate by the independent senators towards the back, but I see that they're taking up a position that is quite distinct and separate from everyone else, which is in one of the alcoves of the chamber.
And these are judges from all levels of the judiciary, or
the High Court? Is the High Court?
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's some justices of the appeal court that may be there as well. In addition, of course, to the acting Chief Justice.
I note that they were led by the manager, information and protocol in the court, former permanent secretary Carl Francis.
Okay.
So the
Granny, what's the significance? I know we ask you this every time. What are the significance of the flags that are being held there?
Right, so traditionally in the military, colors are rallying points. The colors are the rallying points around troops in the field and on parade. So it's always an important symbol for the military to have the colors on parade. And of course, they are always to be treated with reverence.
But what do the colors mean? Like we're seeing blue and red and white and
Well, there are 3 units on parade. There's the regiment, there's the Coast Guard, and the Air Guard. So each unit has their individual color, individual flag, and those flags are consecrated and blessed in a religious ceremony. So they are to be treated with that particular kind of reverence.
Understood.
And while we're looking outside the Red House, there's quite a lot of action that's happening at the same time in the Senate, where we're seeing, not on your screens right now, but we're aware that in the Senate there's a swearing in of the 4 new senators
Independent.
on the independent bench.
Mm.
And will conscientiously and
And we have Suniti Maharaj, a former journalistic colleague.
to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, upon which I am about to enter.
Independent senator.
We have Dr. Gerard Hutchinson, head of psychiatry in UWI. Senator Dr. Gerard Hutchinson.
Dr. Sharda Patasa, an educator and musician, very accomplished in all fields.
Do solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, upon which I am about to enter.
And that was newly minted independent Senator Helon Francis, former Calypso monarch. So that was just to demonstrate that the Senate proceedings were in fact still ongoing. We will broadcast the entire proceedings of the Senate from approximately 4 p.m. today, perhaps earlier, depending on the time at which our live broadcast ends. So the Guard of Honor is in place, awaiting the arrival of Her Excellency. I believe I saw somewhere, Grant, is it at 145 or is 150? I think it's at 150.
150.
150, yeah. It usually is quite a sight when the procession is coming down one of the streets with cavalry around it, you know. And hopefully we'll get a chance to view that shortly if we have cameras in place.
The parade, it takes on a fixed format. So we can basically tell in advance, well, okay, at this point you have the cavalry, then you have the different arms, or does it depend on the occasion?
Well, an occasion like this is considered a class ceremonial. So Her Excellency would be accompanied by the cavalry in rear, and mounted escort provided by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service mounted branch. And once Her Excellency appears in a public display like this, she will always be accompanied by the cavalry in rear. So the occasions in which that would happen would be like Independence Day Parade, Remembrance Day Parade, and of course, the ceremonial opening of Parliament.
Just as an aside, I remember there was an all-female Guard of Honor in 2010. I think the decision was taken to have an all-female Guard of Honor in honor of the country's first female Prime Minister in 2010. Do you recall, Grantley?
I do, yes. So that on your screen there is Her Excellency's standard, hoisted, unbroken. And it's only to let fly and become broken when Her Excellency arrives.
I appreciate the terminology.
So it cannot fly in the absence of Her Excellency's presence in the precincts of the Parliament. It has to be hoisted unbroken and only broken upon Her Excellency's arrival.
Are there other occasions where that's the case, where you have the standard and the unfurling of the standard in that way? Or this is unique to the opening of Parliament?
Oh, no. Traditionally, Her Excellency has to be present at a particular location, and that's the only time that the standard would be broken. And when she leaves, once Her Excellency departs, it's then lowered and removed from the premises. That standard is personal to the holder. So it can only be flown in the presence of Her Excellency or His Excellency the President.
So we are noting off screen that the Senate has apparently adjourned. What happens?
Suspended.
Now?
Yeah,
suspended.
yeah.
What happens now, Jason?
The senators are making their way across to the House of Representatives chamber, so we will see them shortly entering and taking up their positions. For an occasion such as just what is usually done is that the chairs that the members use on a regular occasion are replaced by smaller ones, and all of the government members will sit on the government side. Opposition members and senators will sit in their usual place to the left of the presiding officer. Similarly, the independent senators take up a position roughly the same as where they would in the Senate. That's usually the case. We remain to see if that is in fact what happens on this occasion. As the sitting is suspended, of course, members can speak freely. You see members of the Senate are, in fact, in the chamber now and getting their seats.
So there's quite a buzz. I suppose a certain amount of peacock would be happening at this stage. Then you have the new independent senators. So they're going to be having their first parliamentary banter at the stage with other colleagues.
Yes. They're welcome to the Senate moment. Welcome to the Parliament moment.
Did I say that once Her Excellency the President arrives, the Guard Commander will bring the Guard to attention and the presidential salute will be ordered and a presidential fanfare played, followed by the national anthem. Once Her Excellency takes up a position on the saluting days, the Guard Commander will then do all these military ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
Following that, he will then invite Her Excellency the President to inspect the Guard. Once she accepts his invitation, she will go through the inspection inspect all 3 ranks. In fact, 2 ranks. Guards of honor usually formed up in 2 ranks, at the end of which she will return to the saluting days. What we are seeing there now is the Marshal of Parliament leading the entourage, no doubt, to proceed to the area of Park and Abercrombie, Knox and Abercrombie Streets. Yes, to await Her Excellency's arrival. Right. The Marshal of Parliament, the Chief of Protocol, they will be accompanying both presiding officers, the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the President of the Senate, to the area of Knox and Abercrombie Streets in the vicinity of the regimental headquarters and the Hall of Justice to await Her Excellency's arrival. Introductions will be done at that point, and then the entourage make their way back to the saluting days, where all the military formalities will take place involving the Guard Commander, Major Joseph.
We should have sight of them in a minute because we did see them exiting the building a short while ago and heading to that location.
So, Grantley, what happens to the parade when the president is inside the chamber delivering her address and after? Do they disband or do they wait until she comes out and then there's a ceremony to follow, some procedure to follow?
Well, let's refer directly to the administrative instructions issued by the Chief of Defense Staff. At the end of the inspection, the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives will then escort Her Excellency the President to the A&R Robinson Diplomatic Lounge. The Guard Commander will follow the Guard to be staged at the pedestrian walkway between Regimental Headquarters and the Red House. That's to the western end of Knox Street. So there we see the mounted escort accompanying Her Excellency, and she's about to alight in the vehicle. The mounted escort making their way past Her Excellency and very shortly she will alight from her vehicle to be received by the presiding officers. Presidential standard has just been broken. Her Excellency was received by the Chief of Defense Staff, Air Vice Marshal Darrell Daniel. We shall hear the fanfare shortly. Yeah, no. The Guard Commander, Major Corey Joseph, will march towards Her Excellency the President and invite her to inspect the Guard of Honor. And on this occasion, Her Excellency will be accompanied by the Chief of Defense Staff. Acceded to the request of the Guard Commander, and she will now make her rounds at the inspection. Excellency, pause, pay respects to the color before proceeding with the inspection. Consecrated color is always treated with a particular type of reverence. The Excellency, as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, will always ensure that that type of reverence is paid. Inspection, the music for the inspection. Do we recognize the music for the inspection? Let us build a nation together. That was the piece. Right, so in this case, Her Excellency simply inspected the front rank only. He did not inspect the rear rank.
Excellency will now make her way into the Parliament building, accompanied by the presiding officers.
Her Excellency has chosen an all-white outfit for the occasion, making her way to the Parliament chamber accompanied by the presiding officer.
As you would have indicated earlier, this is like a return home. As Her Excellency was a former presiding officer. So these precincts would be quite familiar to her.
It should also be noted that Her Excellency is the first individual who was served as President of the Senate to become President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And a point of accuracy and for historical accuracy, it should be noted though that several Presidents of the Senate, beginning with the late Dr. Wahid Ali, and until recently Senator the Honorable Nigel de Freitas, they have acted on occasions as President of the Republic.
Indeed. We were discussing off here that there have been some occasions where if the president is out of the country or unwell and the president of the Senate is out of the country or unwell, that the Speaker of the House is the next in line to act as President of the Republic. And I do recall on at least two occasions, I think once in the case of Mr. Brandra Sinanan and also in the case of former Speaker Wade Mark, that the Speaker did in fact act as President of the Republic. That may not be a complete record. I may have certainly missed others, but those are two that I recall off the top of my head.
The only one I'm aware of is the one involving former Speaker Wade Mark, when he acted for a couple of days as president.
Mm-hmm.
So the guard commander will follow the guard, and they will hold in an area at the pedestrian walkway between regimental headquarters and the Red House. That is on Lower Knox Street.
So though that those actions are largely ceremonial, one would assume that in terms of security, there would be an abundance of security in place, because we do have all arms of the government all in one place at the same time.
Without a doubt. Seen and unseen.
Yes. So
Well, I mean,
certain.
security issues are not one we discuss
Correct.
openly,
Yes.
but certainly the ceremonial aspects of it are in place, because we have the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces present.
So at this time in the Red House, Her Excellency will be chatting with the presiding officers and getting ready to form into a procession to make their way into the Parliament chamber, where upon her arrival the national anthem will be played. We shall have prayers from representatives of the First People, the Baha'i faith, the Christian, Hindu and Muslim representatives. And following this, Her Excellency will present her address. The national anthem will again be played, and then Her Excellency will depart.
One recalls that it is at that point, when Her Excellency is about to enter the chamber, that the Marshal of the Parliament is on stage. The Marshal has to be able to pitch his voice at a particular level to capture the attention of everybody in that chamber.
Bradley, I think you're reliving some memories from 2001.
Well, one would have had to do what one had to do in those days. You back your instructions. Her Excellency the President, to get the entire chamber's attention and to get everybody alive.
Yeah. So on our programs, we see under item 13, His Excellency Kerwin Garcia, Senior Counsel, First Gentleman, will be, that's the wrong part, that's escorted out, but he will enter the chamber. That's point number 7, and all persons will stand. So he will enter just before the presiding officers escort Her Excellency into the chamber.
It is important to note that this same type of protocol obtained on the occasion of the 61st anniversary of Independence Parade, where His Excellency arrived just prior to Her Excellency's own arrival at the Savannah. I remember that he arrived just after the Prime Minister, before the President, and he was
Indeed.
greeted by the Chief of Protocol and the Minister of National Security.
Yeah. That is indeed the protocol. Prime Minister and then President. president should always be the last to arrive and the first to leave.
Well, yes,
And-
but I was speaking more in terms of the spouse of
Yes.
the president.
Mhm.
So at this stage, we would expect that all members of parliament, senators, members of the judiciary, and guests should be seated.
Everyone should
awaiting
be
their
seated
arrival.
at this point and awaiting the arrival, yes.
We see on the screen,
That is the wife of the Prime Minister.
wife of the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
former Prime Minister Basir Pandey, and his daughter Michaela.
His daughter Michaela, yeah. Mhm. I have to admit, Mr. Pandey always looks very sprightly.
Who is this?
Mr. Pandey.
Oh, actually.
His Excellency is now making his way into the chamber.
This is also a first for him.
Yes, it would be.
Yeah.
Yes, at Parliament, yes.
Mhm.
I think we heard it very clearly, apparently.
Very, very clearly. The remarkable protocol, remarkable practice of protocol in the case of the presidential spouse. There's no doubt here at all that he's addressed as His Excellency. He's given his rank as well, SC Senior Counsel in the legal profession. There's no doubt about that.
And the Speaker of the House will escort Her Excellency, the President.
I guess that there are people who would be observing otherwise to say this is complete female power. Female president, female Speaker of the House of Representatives, a female President of the Senate.
Well, not anymore.
Former President of the Senate.
Yes. That's why Grantley, I remember that incident in 2010 when the Guard of Honor was comprised of entirely female officers.
That's correct, yeah. And that coincided with the fact that we had a female Prime Minister for the first time.
Correct, yeah.
I think in any event, remember once there was a drive, I don't know whatever happened to it in terms of getting 50% representation in the House.
In the House.
You know,
The numbers in the Senate tend to be closer.
closer, yeah.
Yeah, the House of Representatives still lags behind by a little bit. I don't have the figures in front of me, but I think it's 30-something, 30-something% in the House.
The number 1 and 2 in the Senate are both males. That
Yes.
the Freitas and the Vice President is male as well.
Dr. Mohammed, yes. Ibrahim.
But I think over the years that imbalance has been addressed somewhat, and it's unfolding in terms of the male-female ratio in Parliament, both houses.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
We continue to have more representation in terms of women. Again, more so in the Senate. There's still majority male in the House of Representatives, but the numbers are are increasing slowly. I wish I had the numbers in front of me here. I did have them at one point in time where you would tell with each parliament what the percentages are. So the procession is forming, and soon we will hear the presidential fanfare.
Her Excellency, Christine Carla Kangaloo, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Tamushi Adayali Wachinachi, great God of all creation. Great Holy Spirit, we thank you for the blessing us with the beauty of your creation and providing us for us all from the land. As in your great wisdom you have ordered the sun and the moon, the winds and the waters to keep their parts. So, great Holy Spirit, we pray that you give wisdom to our leaders in this fourth session of the 12th Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, that they would choose the right path when they make decisions on behalf of the nation. Help them to be diligent in ensuring that these decisions, which can make or break our nation, are carefully implemented to the benefit of all, including the vulnerable sectors of the population, so that none be left behind. Give this Parliament the gift of listening and the ability to discern through circumstances that arise. May our leaders in Parliament work together harmoniously and commit to working cooperatively for the common good, demonstrating humility and respect for one another. We send our prayer to you from the lowest earth to the highest heaven, and ask that the guardian Holy Spirits of the four directions bear witness to our prayer. Ehe, Papa, Tamushi Adayali Wachinachi, Ehe.
O God, Almighty Protector, O thou who art the confirmer of every just power and equitable empire in eternal glory, everlasting power, continuance, and greatness, Strengthen with the abundance of thy mercy every government which act with equity towards its subjects, and every dominion under whose flag the poor and weak find protection. We ask thee by thy holiness and bounty to pour out thy blessings upon this government, which has stretched its tent over citizens from every land, that its inhabitants, its industries, its territories may be penetrated by justice. O God, strengthen its executives, give authority and influence to its words and utterance, protect its territories and dominions, guard its reputation, make its ideals to echo throughout the world, reveal its traces and exalt its principles by thy conquering power and wonderful might throughout the kingdoms of creation. Thou art the confirmer of whomsoever thou willest. Verily, thou art the powerful and the mighty.
Let us pray. May God be merciful to us and bless us, show us the light of his countenance, and come to us. Let your ways be known upon earth, your saving health among all nations. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you judge the peoples with equity and guide all the nations upon earth. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. The earth has brought forth her increase. May God, our own God, give us his blessing. May God give us his blessing, and may all the ends of the earth stand in awe of him. The Psalm 67. Eternal God and Heavenly Father, you hold all things in your hands. All time belongs to you and all ages. To you belong glory and power. You have revealed yourself to us as Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer across time and space. We bring before you today the Parliament of this nation, reopening for a new term. Bless, preserve, and inspire them anew with the wisdom, loyalty, and grace needed for meeting new challenges and for bringing resolution to old and enduring ones. Enable, O Lord, their working together and their focus and emphasis on the common good of all. Grant them grace to put loyalty to what is right above loyalty to party or class, above popularity or human praise, above the interest of self. Empower them with the single-minded motive of service to country and promotion of the welfare of their fellow citizens. Help them to re-energize your people with new hope for safety, justice, prosperity, and peace as they continue to walk humbly before you. Receive our prayers and supplications through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
As we commemorate together the opening of yet another Parliament and to chart the course for our nation's affairs, as well as pass laws for the betterment and welfare of all, we seek your guidance in our deliberations and to grant us the wisdom to do what is righteous and fair. We humbly beseech blessings for our beloved nation and grant everyone assembled in its august house peace, prosperity, and equal opportunity. May our intellects be stimulated and enabled to serve our citizenry with honesty, integrity, and without fear or favor, and to keep the trust of those who have elected us here as we continue to ask your divine grace in guiding us all towards building a better nation. Om Bharanam Kananebhe Surnayama Deva Bhadram Pashemakshabiraya Jatra Stadaidangai Shishtavagung Sastanobir Bishemahi Devahitam Yadayu. O Devas, let our ears hear only that which is auspicious. O God, let our eyes see only that which is auspicious. By keeping the senses still and praying through the body, by listening and seeing the auspicious one, we can attain the life allotted by the gods and thus attain perfection in our life. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahavedam Kadavavahe, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. May the Guru and the disciple be paved on the path of study together. May the Guru and the disciple enjoy studies. May the Guru and the disciple should do the work of study with deep concentration. Let what we study be full of genius. May it not give rise to enmity because of ignorance. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan the accursed. I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, Ihdina siratal mustaqim, siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent, the Merciful, owner of the Day of Judgment. Thee do we worship, and thee do we ask for help. Guide us on the right path. O Allah, we give praise and thanks to you for this day, the ceremonial opening of the 4th session of the 12th Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. We ask you, O Allah, to bless our leaders and all members of Parliament and all those who are in positions of responsibility. Give them health, strength, patience, and the ability to make the right decisions that will benefit all citizens of our country. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless everyone. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun alal mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Glorified is thy Lord, the Lord of majesty, from that which they attribute unto him. And peace be unto those sent to warn, and praise be unto Allah, Lord of the worlds. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Mr. President of the Senate, Madam Speaker of the House, honorable members of Parliament. I would like to begin by thanking Madam Speaker for her kind invitation to address you on this, the occasion of the ceremonial opening of the 4th session of the 12th Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I would also like to thank all of you, our nation's parliamentarians, for your service in and to the Parliament, and by extension, the wider society. I especially wish to thank those outgoing members of Parliament who have for years served selflessly and diligently in the Senate, as well as those incoming members of Parliament who have answered the call to national service in the Senate for the first time. To all who have ever answered, who are continuing to answer, and who are for the first time about to answer the call to parliamentary service, you have a nation's thanks. Like the presidency, Parliament service is often misunderstood. For many of us, the sum of what we understand to be parliamentary service is what we see on the Parliament channel when we arrive home, tired from work on afternoons, and we look at parliamentarians debating bills on Tuesdays, when the Senate usually sits, and on Fridays, when the House of Representatives usually sits. The Parliament channel has done tremendous work in bringing the business of Parliament to the notice of the public. But for all of the Parliament channel's efforts and for all of its value, the sittings of Parliament twice a week remain all that a significant segment of our society knows about the workings of our Parliament. Given the tremendous scope of work that the Parliament does, this is regrettable. One of the initiatives to which the Office of the President is committed is better explaining to the population what the Office of President involves. I respectfully suggest that we in the Parliament might also wish to consider showcasing, even more than we are showcasing now, what it is we do beyond debating bills. I say we because by Section 39 of the Constitution, there shall be a Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, which shall consist of the President, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. So the President is in fact part of the Parliament. But I also say we because I have been lucky enough in my lifetime to have sat where you are sitting today, on both sides of the floor, at different times as it turned out, and eventually in the chair in the Senate. Serving as a parliamentarian was among the greatest privileges of my life. And I don't imagine that my heart will ever truly abandon this institution that I have come to admire and to respect. All of us parliamentarians can be sure, though, that that admiration and respect are not universally felt. This, I believe, is at least partly because the public whom we serve has for so long been fed a constant fear of negativity about Parliament. Parliament has certainly been an extremely popular target of critics in recent years. I often wonder whether matters haven't got to the stage where the population is almost programmed into a certain cynicism about Parliament and about parliamentarians. When I sat where you sat, I experienced the effects of this cynicism firsthand. The year was 2007. I had just been elected to the House of Representatives as the member for Pointe-a-Pierre. On a thank you walkabout in my constituency, just a few days following the elections, a gentleman complained to me outside of his gate that he had not seen me since the elections. Such was the negative programming that the gentleman's reasoning could not yield to the fact that there had practically been no time between the elections and my seeing him to found the basis of any legitimate complaint as to my absence. Many of you have faced or will face similar unjustified knee-jerk cynicism. This is not to say that some of the cynicism surrounding parliamentarians has not been earned. Far from it. But like in the case of that gentleman, one is left to wonder at how much that cynicism is simply an autonomic and an unfair reaction to all things and all persons having to do with Parliament. I have gone as far as to say unfair because from my own experience of the institution of Parliament, I can give the population the assurance that there is an enormous amount that our country has to be proud about where our Parliament is concerned. In a society in which we are programmed to believe that nothing works I can tell you that as an institution, Parliament most certainly does. When, as Senate President, Madam Speaker, and I had the privilege of meeting with colleagues throughout the Commonwealth on parliamentary conferences, our colleagues would often tell us how impressed they were at how efficiently Trinidad and Tobago's Parliament functions. That, I can assure you, is by no accident. Our clerks are regularly invited to other jurisdictions as subject matter experts to deliver presentations on the working of Parliament's various committees and the like. Beyond the customary sit-ins on the Tuesdays and Fridays, our Parliament is always at work, including by way of its numerous joint select committees. Let me say a word about these joint select committees. Joint select committees provide valuable oversight over government agencies that foster public accountability and public engagement. Several recommendations by these committees have been adopted and implemented. One of the recommendations which has been adopted and implemented during the last parliamentary session was the publication by the Central Bank of the fees charged to the public by banks and the fee structure of banks in general in a sample of Caribbean countries. The Parliament channel carries the sittings of joint select committees too, but it is only that their sittings are often held during working hours so that the majority of the working population misses the opportunity to witness them live. Even in respect of the more familiar Tuesday and Friday sittings, Parliament staff is always working, including in the way of assisting members with research on their various presentations. It was by no accident, and it is to our country's credit, that during the COVID-19 pandemic, our Parliament was quickly able to adapt, more quickly than many, and put in place mechanisms and measures that allowed us to continue sitting safely throughout the length of the pandemic. These matters I have been describing are just some of the operations of Parliament that are perhaps not as well known or as appreciated as they should be. And it is, I think, this lack of appreciation of all that our Parliament really does that allows the cynicism in our society about the institution to rear its head and to fester. While others on the outside see and value the work and the worth of our Parliament, here at home, our Parliament is sometimes cast in the role of the biblical prophet who is not without honor, but in his own country and among his own kin and in his own house. Moving away from Parliament as an institution for a moment, permit me to venture into potentially even less popular waters and to say that there is also an enormous amount in terms of the sacrifices and the stresses that parliamentarians undergo that our country can and should be grateful for. I appreciate that this sentiment is probably less palatable than anything that I have said thus far, but that doesn't make it any less true. As I have said, some of the cynicism surrounding parliamentarians has certainly been earned. We do not always conduct ourselves in accordance with the standing orders of the House or of the Senate. Truthfully, sometimes we go too far and descend to depths of which we should be ashamed. But equally truthfully, the work that parliamentarians, particularly elected parliamentarians, do is fundamental to the well-being of our society. And that kind of work is, I fear, also underappreciated. Many elected parliamentarians have had similar experiences to the one that I had when, as a member for Pointe-a-Pierre, just as the constituency office doors were being closed late one evening, a young mother appeared. She was heavily pregnant, so pregnant that I was genuinely fearful that she might actually give birth right then and there in the constituency office, casting me into the role of midwife for the first time in my life. And her landlord had just evicted her for not paying the rent that she simply could not afford to pay. It fell upon me then to work out a solution for her and her children, both alive and unborn, at that hour of the night. Elected MPs face and have to deal with these and sadly far worse situations, sometimes many times in the course of the same day. People in need sometimes expect their elected MPs to pay their grocery bills, buy school books for their children, and take on the role of plumbers when the pipes in their homes burst. Many elected MPs actually do these things. Yet far from being appreciated for their efforts, elected MPs are often ridiculed just for drawing a salary. I recall when a colleague from the opposition related to me the story of his leaving the supermarket after having made groceries at month end and being accused by a constituent of having the government pay for his groceries. There is often a mistaken belief that the state pays for everything where an MP is concerned, or even worse, that MPs do not earn their keep and have no right to a salary like everybody else. Truthfully, there is no salary scale that can begin to compensate a member for the emotional and the mental stress that are routinely undergone when he or she tries to do his or her best to serve at the constituency level. When the responsibilities of debating bills, participating in joint select committees, and sitting as cabinet ministers are superimposed upon those of servicing one's constituency and are mixed in with a dismissive cynicism of even one's very best efforts, it is a wonder that anybody offers himself for national service by way of parliamentary duty at all. This is why I began this address by thanking all who have ever answered the call to parliamentary service. Until you have tried it on for size, it is far too easy to be cynical about what parliamentarians do and the sacrifices they are called upon to make. I appreciate that I might well be criticized for mounting what might be construed as this robust defense of parliamentarians. I am not fearful of that. What I am fearful about is us devolving into a society where cynicism and criticism are our default attitudes about institutions and people who, as flawed as they are only there to try to help make our lives better. I believe that it is only when we come to understand the full scale of what elected MPs do and have to face that we will be able properly to hold them to account. I am not for one moment advocating a disregard of those voices that rightly speak out against the abuses suffered at the hands of some errant parliamentarians. Rather, I am advocating that due and proper consideration should be given to the value and the importance of the roles parliamentarians play when more often than not they are given credit for what they try to do and when they actually do get things right. My hope is that in this fourth session of the 12th Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Parliament will continue further along the road of getting things right. There are a number of areas on which I hope Parliament might see it fit to focus during this upcoming session. Areas of focus which I hope Parliament will agree can help Trinidad and Tobago to get things right. Permit me to list just 5 of them. First, I hope that there can be greater collaboration across the aisle, particularly where legislative and other measures designed to help us fight crime are concerned. The urgency is obvious. The pain and the suffering are unbearable. These alone should drive parliamentarians to put aside their party rivalries, join hands across the aisle, and collaborate on how to stem crime and criminal conduct. I appreciate that some will say, as Samuel Johnson once famously said, that, like a second marriage, is the triumph of hope over experience. But I prefer to associate myself with the more uplifting philosophy contained in Alexander Pope's equally famous statement that hope springs eternal in the human breast. Second, my hope is that Parliament will, in that vein, pull together to enact laws that are even more reflective of our society's goals and vision, including in relation to legislation that both protects and advances culture and the arts. In particular, I hope that it will be seen fit for there to be an urgent parliamentary intervention that results, at long last, in the steel pan being firmly and irrevocably declared our national instrument. Those in the industry will tell you that giving the steel pan formal and official national instrument status is critical to opening doors for the industry in international markets. The General Assembly of the United Nations has formally recognized the universal value and significance of the steel pan. I believe that it is high time that we formally do the same. Third, I hope that we will see the appearance of additional legislation that helps us further entrench our country's place in the modern age, including in areas such as persons with disabilities. More than 20 years ago, when I held my very first cabinet position as Minister with responsibility for social services delivery, it became clear from the many protests that were held at that time that it was urgent for more attention to be paid to the needs and the rights of persons with disabilities. Over the years since then, there has been a great deal of consultation over a Persons with Disabilities Act. It is my hope that these consultations will bear fruit during the life of this parliamentary session, and that this country will have legislation that better promotes and protects the rights of persons with disabilities. If we are to become a developed country, we need to have laws that create a more inclusive society. In terms of legislation that further entrenches us in the modern age, my hope is for a parliament that is bold in its legislative agenda. I hope that this session's agenda will be as forward-looking as practicable and will include legislation that treats at one and the same time with the awesome potential and the looming threats of artificial intelligence. I hope as well that consideration will be given to treating legislatively with the new realities in the post-pandemic world of work, such as working from home and hybrid work. These are not merely passing fads which have gone the way of the pandemic. They are what our younger generation is demanding from us as they insist upon their right to a higher quality work experience. Fourth, I hope that Parliament will give consideration to reviewing its standing orders to create a committee like the Public Bill Committee in the United Kingdom, which is a committee of the United Kingdom's Parliament set up to examine the details of particular bills and report thereon to the Parliament. In our Parliament, the experience has been, at least when I was there, that it is a struggle, often a vain one, to try to get through the entire parliamentary agenda in any one session. A single sit-in of each House, once a week, dealing with one bill at a time, is not likely to result in all of the business of each House being completed in any given session. Adopting the model of a Public Bill Committee is likely to prove a far more efficient way of bringing legislation to the floor and actually getting it passed before the clock runs down on a session. Using a Public Bill Committee to undertake more in-depth studies of proposed legislation will save time on the parliamentary floor, consumed by clause debating, and will allow parliamentarians to spend more time treating with wider issues of policy. I am aware that this suggestion has implications for whether we ought or ought not to have a system of full-time parliamentarians, and that idea has in turn financial and other implications. But there is so much work to be done that I fear that unless some creative and different ways found to enable us to get through and then add to our parliamentary agenda, we will forever be playing catch-up. Fifth, and importantly, I hope that Parliament will see it fit to develop an annual timetable or fixed agenda which will serve to promote certainty and efficiency by allowing, among other things, for better planning. The Parliament of Ontario in Canada has, for example, developed an annual agenda which our Parliament can perhaps consider using as a prototype. These are just some of my hopes for this next session of Parliament. I offer them not as directives, which of course I have no power to issue, but for consideration as potential targets, which it is, I think, my duty to help identify. It has been my privilege to have been able to share them with you. I end now, as I began, by thanking you this time for listening to me. When next we meet, I hope that I will be able to thank you, not just for listening to me, but for having heard me. I hope that at that time, we will be able to say that we are further along in building a parliament that is better understood and better valued. I hope that we will be able to say that we have made greater progress in fostering a better understanding of the demanding roles that our parliamentarians play. And armed with that better understanding, I hope that we will be able to say that we held them to greater account. I hope that we will be able to say that we have advanced even further in creating a parliament that collaborates, legislates, and acts boldly and decisively in essential areas of our national life. And that is even more efficient than undoubtedly it already is. In short, I hope that when next we meet, we can share reports of a parliament and a society that continue to work hand in hand to create a better Trinidad and Tobago. May God bless you all, and may God bless our nation.
Chamber. The President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives are now escorting Her Excellency the President out of the House of Representatives chamber of the Red House. And Her Excellency, of course, is accorded a presidential fanfare. Having completed the ceremonial opening of the Parliament. The Guard Commander will fall back in the guard in front of the Red House, facing west, and await the arrival of Her Excellency the President. Once Her Excellency the President gets in the precincts of the Guard Commander will bring the Guard to attention, and a presidential salute will be given, and the national anthem will be played. At the end of which, the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives will then escort Her Excellency the President back to the Arthur N.R. Robinson Diplomatic Lounge.
So Wesley, any thoughts on Her Excellency's
The President covered quite a lot of ground in the 22 minutes. I think it was established beyond reasonable doubt her experience, both as a Member of Parliament, elected Member of Parliament, and as a Senator. I think that her appeal for a lessening of the tendency towards cynicism and undue criticism was taken in stride. I think she spent quite some time on that, and I think that's based on her personal experience. She spoke about, well, I saw the Parliament channel gaining honorary mention more than once, and I think that the admonition there basically was that what you're seeing on your screen is not all that there is to parliamentary work. That though with respect to Parliament workers, the members of Parliament, the senators, and everyone associated with the process, that it's much, much more than witnessing something on the screen. I think that and I'm leading up to her 5 priority areas, because I think in her own way, she prescribed a parliamentary agenda, and that one that's not entirely not in keeping with the current pace of things, except that what's novel about it, and I jumped to her priority area number 2, which has to do with culture, and the pronouncement of the steel pan as a national instrument. I think that declaration has been lobbied for time and again by the steel pan movement, and by a lot of people who are concerned about moving our cultural development into a different sphere. But she did speak about today's headline issue, which has to do with crime, calling for greater collaboration among all concerned within the Parliament and outside of the Parliament.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing now the Guard of Honor reformed.
Anthem played now.
All right.
National anthem played there now. Remember she went back out, right?
Sure.
For the anthem.
You were on.
Now, where I am, I will get a momentum towards me. No. Shoulder up. Yeah, well.
So 5 priority areas. 3 of them, of course, the headline issue of crime, advancement of culture and the arts through the pronounced proclamation of the steel pan as a national instrument, and of course, given her past portfolios, ministerial portfolios, she would of course not end a presentation such as this without mention of legislation in support of people with disabilities.
Indeed.
But there are 2 special sections, and she focused on you folks working in Parliament, and those are 2 pretty strong recommendations coming that may or may not necessarily mean legislative change, but it would have implications for the work of Parliament, the establishment of a public bill committee, which I think, and as she has conceded, would involve a certain level of work and the need for greater resources, but it would, in a sense, as she argued, help streamline the conduct of Parliament, so you have the more timely passage of legislation.
As well as the agenda,
the
sitting agenda.
Timetable that would lead to better planning for the work of Parliament.
She used the example of Ontario, and I remember in Ottawa, in the Parliament in Canada, in January, they know every day that they're going to sit for the duration of the year. Part of it is just a question of size, because you have people whose ridings are 4,000 miles away from Ottawa, so they have to know that they're going to be in Ottawa during a particular period. It's a much larger distance than exists here. But certainly anything to increase and improve the efficiency of the legislature, we certainly would be for it, but it just remains for whether the members of Parliament take heed of it. Certainly we'll be here next year listening to see.
Well, it makes eminent sense, because every time you get occasions such as this, we are referring to things that were left hanging from the previous session, and there's so much undone business.
We see the members of the Supreme Court and masters of the High Court leaving now. Got a few messages during the interim to correct something that we may have said earlier. We hope we got it right this time.
Justices of appeal.
Justices of appeal, yes.
Your Excellency, the President is being escorted by the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the President of the Senate back to the Guard of Honor, where she will receive certain accolades. Preceded by the Marshal of Parliament. Her Excellency strides confidently onto the saluting days, and the Chief of Defense Staff has joined the entourage. He will be conducting Her Excellency on this particular aspect of her duty.
You say your mic wasn't on all the time, but
Hold on. Your Excellency, the President has granted approval, has granted permission for the Guard Commander to carry on with his duties. At this point, Your Excellency will then be escorted back to the Arthur N.R. Robinson Diplomatic Lounge of the Red House.
and it is at this time, once she has been escorted to the Diplomatic Lounge, that the presiding officers will return to their respective chambers to conclude proceedings in both houses. What usually happens is that the address by the president is laid as a paper in the house, and at that point the adjournment will take place.
Right! Turn!
Major Corey Joseph.
So Wesley, were you finished, or you wanted to just...
Of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and she did say that there is scope for greater understanding of the role of the president, because there's this tendency to see the role of the president as beginning and ending with these ceremonial events. But she did identify with the parliament and her continued role as part of the parliament, and I think she did a very clever job of integrating her knowledge both as an elected MP and as a senator, and the relationship of those roles with her current function as president of the country. And so, as you would have noted, because as parliamentary staff, you would be taking careful note. She basically set out an agenda, not only for the parliamentarians, but for the professionals employed in the parliament, to better streamline their work and to get more prompt and efficient action out of proposed legislation, bearing in mind the already packed work agendas, both of the members of parliament and the and parliamentary staff. I think that on her main on the theme that she wanted to leave us with, I think, is the admonition for the population not to descend into a kind of terminal cynicism over how things work, over the work of politicians and politics, and she placed part of the onus for addressing that on parliamentarians themselves regarding their own professional conduct, their conduct as elected representatives and nominated members of the Senate.
She certainly has given us a lot to contemplate in the coming year.
And it would be very interesting to see those who want to follow this thing. I mean, this is good. The address, as you said, Jason, is going to be tabled as a paper in both houses. The extent to which that's taken to heart and becomes now integrated into the agenda, the busy agenda that we spoke about before. And there is scope. I mean, if you look at it very closely, there is scope, for example, in addressing the issue of crime. She calls for a collaborative approach, which means that she's relaying this message to all the various elements represented in Parliament, that there needs to be a national collaborative effort to address the problem of crime, the focus on the cultural industries, and improving the state of people who operate in that space, with particular reference to the steel plant, but of course, in general, with regard to culture and the arts, management of the situation regarding people with disabilities, and then, of course, the parliamentary agenda, which she believes should be front and center as the work of parliamentarians and all elements concerned. I think presumably the media as well, because when she spoke about the Parliament channel, I think that what she wanted to signal there was that, okay, yes, what you're seeing there is a true representation of what has happened within the chambers, but there's much, much more about it than what we see on our screens.
It is.
And I imagine now with provisions being made for
there being
virtual
no other
participation,
business, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.
I think during the discussion we may have missed the presiding officer returning, but the House is now adjourned to a date to be fixed. Meanwhile, the proceedings of the Senate have also concluded. And so that brings us to the end of the ceremonial opening today. Any closing words, gentlemen, before we wrap up?
No, I was just about making the point that with provisions now for virtual participation, there is no need to whisk any member from any part of the country by whisk them away by helicopter and land them in the savannah and so on. You know that we had to do that some time ago. So
no comment. Yeah. With the intention of the proclamation is that if a member is ill, well, the details have to be worked out with the presiding officer. But usually if you are ill and unable to attend, because you have to be in Trinidad and Tobago, according to the proclamation, that you can join the proceedings virtually. And so there will still be a full complement of members to make decisions and particularly to vote on matters as well. Wesley?
Yeah, I think that's a very important innovation. But I'm urging that we keep an eye on what the president had to say and how that unfolds as parliamentary action in the months to come.
Very well. So with those few words from our panel, we thank you for staying with us on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament channel. This meeting, this ceremonial opening, will be broadcast later this evening. But coming up in about 30 minutes' time, we will in fact have the proceedings that would have transpired in the Senate from start to finish. There you will see the senators being sworn in and the end of proceedings that would have just transpired. So from all of us here at the Parliament channel, from Wesley Gibbons, Grantley Dick and myself, Jason Elcock, we thank you and do have a pleasant afternoon.